The Fokker Dr.I Dreidecker was a World War I fighter aircraft built by Fokker-Flugzeugwerke. The Dr.I saw widespread service in the spring of 1918. It became renowned as the aircraft in which Manfred von Richthofen gained his last 19 victories, and in which he was killed on April 21, 1918. Design and development. In February 1917, the Sopwith triplane began to appear over the Western Front. Despite its single Vickers machine gun armament, the Sopwith swiftly proved itself superior to the more heavily armed Albatros fighters then in use by the Luftstreitkräfte currency FTE. Fokker-Flugzeugwerke responded by converting an unfinished biplane prototype into the V4, a small, rotary-powered triplane with a steel tube fuselage and thick cantilever wings, first developed during Fokker's government-mandated collaboration with Hugo Junkers. Initial tests revealed that the V4 had unacceptably high control forces resulting from the use of unbalanced ailerons and elevators. Instead of submitting the V4 for a type test, Fokker produced a revised prototype designated V5. The most notable changes were the introduction of horn-balanced ailerons and elevators, as well as longer span wings. The V5 also featured interplane struts, which were not necessary from a structural standpoint, but which minimized wing flexing. On July 14, 1917, Flyeg issued an order for 20 pre-production aircraft. The V5 prototype, serial 101/17, was tested to destruction at Adlershof on August 11, 1917. Operational history. The first two pre-production triplanes were designated FI, in accord with Flyeg's early class prefix for triplanes. These aircraft, serials 102/17 and 103/17, were the only machines to receive the FI designation and could be distinguished from subsequent aircraft by a slight convex curve of the tailplane's leading edge. The two aircraft were sent to JASTAs 10 and 11 for combat evaluation, arriving at Markbeek, Belgium on August 28, 1917. Richthofen first flew 102/17 on September 1, 1917 and shot down two enemy aircraft in the next 2 days. He reported to the Kijkenluft that the FI was superior to the Sopwith triplane. Richthofen recommended that fighter squadrons be re-equipped with the new aircraft as soon as possible. The combat evaluation came to an abrupt conclusion when Oberleutnant Kurt Wolf, Staffelfahr 1/4 Air of JASTA 11, was shot down in 102/17 on September 15, and Lieutenant Werner Voss, Staffelfahr 1/4 Air of JASTA 10, was killed in 103/17 on September 23. The remaining pre-production aircraft, designated Dr.I, were delivered to JASTA 11. Flyeg issued a production order for 100 triplanes in September, followed by an order for 200 in November. Apart from the straight leading edge of the tailplane, these aircraft were almost identical to the FI. The primary distinguishing feature was the addition of wingtip skids, which proved necessary because the aircraft was tricky to land and prone to ground looping. In October, Fokker began delivering the Dr.I to squadrons within Richthofen's Jagdgeschwader. Compared to the Albatros and Alts fighters, the Dr.I offered exceptional maneuverability. Though the ailerons were not very effective, the rudder and elevator controls were light and powerful. Rapid turns, especially to the right, were facilitated by the triplane's marked directional instability. Vizefeldwebel Franz Hemmer of JASTA 6 said, "The triplane was my favorite fighting machine because it had such wonderful flying qualities. I could let myself stunt a Euro looping and rolling a Euro, and could avoid an enemy by diving with perfect safety. The triplane had to be given up because although it was very maneuverable, it was no longer fast enough." As Hemmer noted, the Dr.I was considerably slower than contemporary Allied fighters in level flight and in a dive. While initial rate of climb was excellent, performance fell off dramatically at higher altitudes because of the low compression of the Obersolar II, a clone of the Lorraine 9J rotary engine. As the war continued, chronic shortages of castor oil made rotary operation increasingly difficult. The poor quality of German ersatz lubricant resulted in many engine failures, particularly during the summer of 1918. The Dr.I suffered other deficiencies. The pilot's view was poor during takeoff and landing. The cockpit was cramped and furnished with materials of inferior quality. Furthermore, the proximity of the gun butts to the cockpit, combined with inadequate crash padding, left the pilot vulnerable to serious head injury in the event of a crash landing. Wing failures. On October 29, 1917, Lieutenant der Reserve Heinrich Guntermann, Staffelfahr 1/4 Air of Jasta 15, was performing aerobatics when his triplane broke up. Guntermann was fatally injured in the ensuing crash landing. Lieutenant der Reserve Gar 1/4 Nther Pastor of Jasta 11 was killed 2 days later when his triplane broke up in level flight. Inspection of the wrecked aircraft showed that the wings had been poorly constructed. Examination of other high-time triplanes confirmed these findings. On November 2, Flyeg grounded all remaining triplanes pending an inquiry. Flyeg convened a STIRS commission which concluded that poor construction and lack of waterproofing had allowed moisture to damage the wing structure. This caused the wing ribs to disintegrate and the ailerons to break away in flight. In response to the crash investigation, Fokker improved quality control on the production line, particularly varnishing of the wing spars and ribs, to combat moisture. Fokker also strengthened the rib structures and the attachment of the auxiliary spars to the ribs. Existing triplanes were repaired and modified at Fokker's expense. After testing a modified wing at Adlershof, Flyeg authorized the triplane's return to service on November 28, 1917. Production resumed in early December. By January 1918, Jastas 6 and 11 were fully equipped with a triplane. Only 14 squadrons used the Dr.I as their primary equipment. Most of these units were part of Jagdgeschwadron I, II, or III. Frontline inventory peaked in late April 1918, with 171 aircraft in service on the Western Front. Despite corrective measures, the Dr.I continued to suffer from wing failures. On February 3, 1918, Lieutenant Hans-Joachim Wolff of Jasta 11 successfully landed after suffering a failure of the upper wing leading edge and ribs. On March 18, 1918, Lothar von Richthofen, Staffelfahr 1/4 Air of Jasta 11, suffered a failure of the upper wing leading edge during combat with Sopwith Camels of No. 73 Squadron and Bristol F-2BS of No. 62 Squadron. Richthofen was seriously injured in the ensuing crash landing. Post-war research revealed that poor workmanship was not the only cause of the triplane structural failures. In 1929, National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics investigations found that the upper wing carried a higher lift coefficient than the lower wing. At high speeds it could be 2.55 times as much. The triplane's chronic structural problems destroyed any prospect of large-scale orders. Production eventually ended in May 1918, by which time only 320 had been manufactured. The Dr.I was withdrawn from frontline service as the Fokker Dreidecker entered widespread service in June and July. Jasta 19 was the last squadron to be fully equipped with the Dr.I. Surviving triplanes were distributed to training and home defense units. Several training aircraft were rejoined with a 75 kW Goebbels II. At the time of the armistice, many remaining triplanes were assigned to fighter training schools at Nivelles, Belgium, and Valenciennes, France. Allied pilots tested several of these triplanes and found their handling qualities to be impressive. Experimental engines. Several Dr.Is were used as test beds for experimental engines. One aircraft, designated V7, was fitted with the Siemens Halsschiebe rotary engine. The V7 exhibited exceptional rate of climb and ceiling, but it proved difficult to handle. Serial 108/17 was used to test the 118 kW Goebbels III, while Serial 469/17 was used to test the 108 kW Obersolar III. None of these engines were used on production aircraft. One triplane was used as a test bed for an experimental Schwade-gear-driven supercharger. Had the war progressed into 1919, Fokker Dreidecker might have been equipped with them. Post-war. 3 triplanes are known to have survived the armistice. Serial 528-17 was retained as a test bed by the Deutschen Versuchsanstalt für One-Quarter Luftfahrt at Adlershof. After being used in the filming of 2 movies, 528-17 is believed to have crashed sometime in the late 1930s. Serial 152-17, in which Manfred von Richthofen obtained 3 victories, was displayed at the Zielforce Museum in Berlin. This aircraft was destroyed in an Allied bombing raid during World War II. In 1932, Fokker assembled a Dr.I from existing components. It was displayed in the Deutsche Luftfahrtsammlung in Berlin. In 1943, the aircraft was destroyed in an Allied bombing raid. Today, only a few original Dr.I artifacts survive in museums. Replica and reproduction aircraft. Large numbers of replica and reproduction aircraft have been built for both individuals and museums. Bitz Flugzeugbau GmbH built 2 Dr.I replicas for use in 20th-century Fokker Euro unregistered trademark S 1966 film The Blue Max. Because of the expense and scarcity of authentic rotary engines, most airworthy replicas are powered by a Warner Scarab or Continental A670 radial engine. A few, however, feature vintage Lorraine 9J or reproduction Obersolar II rotary engines. Variants: V4, initial prototype, V5, first production prototype, V6, enlarged prototype with Mercedes DII engine, V7, prototype with Siemens Halsksche engine. Operators: German Empire, Luftstreitkraft Currency FTE. Specifications. Data from Quest for Performance. General characteristics: crew, 1, length, 5.77 meters, wingspan, 7.20 m, height, 2.95 m, wing area, 18.70 m2, empty weight, 406 kilograms, loaded weight, 586 kilograms, power plant, 1 Obersolar II 9-cylinder rotary engine, 82 kilowatts, 0 lift drag coefficient, 0.0323, drag area, 0.62 m2, aspect ratio, 4.04, performance, maximum speed, 185 km per hour at sea level, stall speed, 72 km per hour, range, 300 km, service ceiling, 6,095 m, rate of climb, 5.7 meters per second, lift-to-drag ratio, 8.0, armament, 2 7.92 mm Spandau LMG-08 machine guns. See also, Sans Fokker Drive 1 triplane, home-built replica, aircraft of comparable role, configuration and era, sub with triplane, sub with camel. References. Notes Bibliography External links, FokkerDR1.com, research on the Fokker Dr.I triplane, Germany, Fokker Dr.I, the aerodrome Fokker Drive 1 fact sheet a Euronational Museum of the U.S. Air Force, Cole Pallen's rotary-powered Dr.I reproduction at Old Rhinebeck Aerodrome.